We continue our work at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and the next press briefing is weekly update from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. I give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Mr. Hook, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Last week saw yet another effort to kick-start the ceasefire. As has been the practice, there has been another recommitment to agreements to cease fire. We have heard numerous times of such recommitments over the years. On all such occasions, there has been an initial partial adherence to the ceasefire. The number of ceasefire violations decreases for the first few days and then climbs. They press the pause button, not the stop button. And so it has been this time. On Friday, the first 24 hours of this period of renewed commitment to the ceasefire, the SMM recorded 53% decrease in the number of ceasefire violations compared to the day before, from 654 violations to just over 300. The next day, last Saturday, the 26th of August, saw a further decrease. Our monitors on that day recorded 47 ceasefire violations. 47 too many. 47 times civilians were exposed to the risk of death and injury. A notable improvement nonetheless, a pause that shows the sides can actually eliminate violence if they want to. This could be a good starting point for establishing a sustainable silence. By Sunday, however, the numbers of ceasefire violations recorded by the SMM began to climb. 151 on Sunday. Monday it was 173, Tuesday 431, Wednesday 186. The pause is over. Like on so many other occasions, the people of Donbas were offered a small glimmer of hope, a few days of hope. But now, for the sides, it's business as usual. Dear friends, I take no pleasure in criticizing, especially when there was, even if only for a short time, some relative relief for the long-suffering people of Donbas. A few days of reduced levels of violence and reduced risk of death and destruction is not something to be lightly dismissed. But it is not good enough. Frankly, it is not good enough for the people who have now been forced to endure a conflict in its fourth year. It is not good enough for people who have been repeatedly promised there would be the adherence to the ceasefire, and every time, including this time, the promises have been broken. Business as usual is just not acceptable to these people. Countless times now they have heard people recommit to the ceasefire they signed in Minsk 3 years ago. And every time those words have proven to be hollow. Every time the violence has resumed, every time more civilians get killed and injured, more homes destroyed, more industry and jobs gone. Dear friends, words are not enough. There needs to be action. Telling the world that you recommit to the ceasefire needs to be matched by concrete actions to give meaning and substance to these words. If you promise to adhere to the ceasefire agreement you signed, then you need to create the necessary conditions for that ceasefire to work. Those conditions, the withdrawal of heavy weapons and the disengagement of forces and hardware, are well known. Indeed, the sides have already agreed to withdraw weapons and disengage, but like so many other empty words, they have failed to take the appropriate action. This week, for instance, The OSCE SMM spotted heavy weapons in violation of agreed withdrawal lines 112 times, 47 times in government and 65 times in non-government controlled areas. On just one day, last Saturday, the 26th of August, the second day following the recommitment to the ceasefire, we saw 7 multiple launch rocket systems near government-controlled Poltavka. On the same day, in areas not controlled by the government control, we saw 18 multiple launch rocket systems near Muinsk and 20 howitzers and 1 multiple launch rocket system near Bukhaivka. Last week, we also noted that the disengagement process remains largely stalled. In Solote and Petriske, 2 of the pilot areas agreed by the sides, our freedom of movement remains severely restricted as the sides refuse to comprehensively demine. Thankfully, we have 24/7, around-the-clock monitoring capability in all 3 disengagement areas, with cameras recording ceasefire violations as they happen. We have also monitors based in Stanica Luhanska, the 3rd pilot area, on a permanent basis, monitoring day and night. In Stanica Luhanska, personnel and hardware are still clearly not disengaged. The distance separating the sides at the bridge is a mere 200 meters. And remember, the contact line is about 500 kilometers long. In some places, the distances separating the sides are even less. In Yasinovata, we have seen opposing trenches with less than 50 meters of each other. It is worth noting that the worst of the violence last week was in the Yasinovata area. Dear friends, the recommitment to the ceasefire was an encouraging political signal from all signatories of the Minsk agreements. But there needs to be more than just words. Action is required. Withdrawal of weapons and disengagement must take place if the recommitment is to have credibility. Instead of pausing the violence, the sides must stop it. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission will be there and will report on whether or not it actually stops. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Now it's time for questions. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, please, you're welcome. The question will come in Ukrainian.
Crimean News Agency. The following question. One of the reports contains the information that the militants promised to shoot down UAVs if flown above the DFS. I wonder if this matter would be resolved to any end, or this would mean that there will not be monitoring above the SMM with the use of the UAVs. Thank you.
Thank you. It has first to be said that the Minsk agreement specifically foresee the use of technology by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Furthermore, the mandate given to the SMM by the 57 participating states foresee that it has unhindered and safe access to all of Ukraine. We have it made very clear to the sides that we expect that these commitments and our mandate is being respected, and we have been taken intervention with the Joint Center for Control and Coordination and the sites that do obstruct our work to ensure that these incidents are being followed up, persons that have been involved in it are being held to account, and that future incidents are being prevented. As usual, there can only be one reason why we are not allowed to monitor either by patrols or technology, and that is that those who interfere with our work do not want that we see certain developments on the ground happening, because they know we will report the uncomfortable reality to the public in Ukraine and across the world. Thank you.
One more question.
As a follow-up to the first question, you've mentioned that you've informed the JCCC about impediments to your actions and you ask them to follow up to take into account those responsible. Could you recall the facts when you have been informed that the incident was followed up and the violators, well, say since the beginning of this year, were followed up and taken into account? I mean, any impediments to patrolling, impediments to launch of the UAV, several facts of the accountable actually taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. This is also a good opportunity to remind everyone that the Joint Center for Control and Coordination has an explicit responsibility in the agreements, black and white, that they have to issue a rapid response to any impediment to our monitoring activity. So their obligation, the Russian and Ukrainian side in the JCCC, is clearly anchored in the agreements that had been signed by the signatories. And that responsibility is that responsibility we call upon. And we had been given some indication that some action had been taken. However, it is far from being systematic, and the violence against the mission and its assets continues. It shows that whatever actions had been taken had not been efficient enough to prevent incidents from reoccurring. We have also been suggesting that orders to cease fire and orders to prevent the SMM's freedom of movement are being circulated so that it is clear to the troops on the ground and to the armed men on the ground that there has been this recommitment and that the SMM has freedom of movement on the ground. This would be one way to ensure that the last forward position on either side of the line is being informed properly about the words the signatories have been committing to, and that actually then would translate into real action on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. It seems we have no more today, so thank you once again.